Federal Courtroom. Southern District of New York Day. 11 of United States versus Sirs. Sean Combs. The courtroom didn't breathe. Not when they called his name. Not when he stood. And not when Usher Raymond, the poster child of R&B polish and billboard perfection, walked past the defense table, eyes fixed forward like he was heading into a memory he had avoided for 20 years. There was no music now, no velvet suit, no camera-ready smile, just a man holding on to words that had grown heavier with each year of silence. "I used to think I was lucky," he began, voice calm, unnervingly steady. "Chosen, special. That's what they told me at 14, that I was being mentored, that I was next." He didn't look at the jury when he said it. He looked through them, like he wasn't really speaking to anyone in the room, but to a younger version of himself still stuck in that penthouse. "But now I know. I wasn't chosen. I was targeted." Usher said the moment came back to him in flashes. His mother, proud, on the phone. "Baby, Diddy's going to take you in. The jet ticket to New York." The first night in that Midtown tower where every hallway smelled like candle wax and secrets. They called it Flavor Camp, he said. "I thought it was branding. Something cool, something industry, but it wasn't branding. It was a code." The courtroom remained still. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not even a lawyer's pen moving. Usher kept speaking. He described how the silence crept in slowly, how he stopped asking questions after being told, "This is how we do it. Watch and learn. That's how grown men roll." How the mentorship didn't feel like lessons. It felt like observation. And eventually, absorption. It wasn't about music anymore, he admitted. It was about proximity, how close you were allowed to the lifestyle, to the madness, to the man at the center. And then he told them about the night that changed everything. "I woke up around 3 a.m., heard music, low, bass heavy, walked down the hallway. The lights were dimmed. There were candles burning. I thought it was someone shooting a music video. But it wasn't. It was real. It was organized, structured, and no one there looked surprised." He paused, swallowed. "I went back to my room, but I didn't sleep that night, and I never looked at him the same again." That was the first crack. Then came the trip to the Caribbean. Just him, Diddy, a few others. No media, no cameras, just isolation, silence, and a growing realization that this isn't about music at all. I won't get into everything, but I will say, I wasn't given a choice about the environment I was placed in. I thought I was being groomed for greatness, but I was being groomed for compliance. A hush swept through the room, not shock, not outrage, but understanding, recognition. Because it wasn't just about what happened in those rooms. It was about who allowed it, who ignored it, who profited from it. "Nobody warned me," he said flatly. "Not the label, not the lawyers, not even my mother, because they didn't know what they were sending me into." Usher then lifted a piece of paper, a copy of a document yellowed at the corners, his NDA signed at 16. My mom co-signed. We were told it was standard, but it wasn't a contract. It was a muzzle. The judge nodded, allowing it into the record. "You don't bite the hand that feeds you," Diddy once told him. "But what if that hand's been around your throat the whole time?" It wasn't just a memory anymore. It was evidence. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Usher took a breath before continuing, fingers lightly brushing the edge of the witness stand. "People think it happened overnight, that one day it was just all wrong. But that's not how it works. It never starts with a slap. It starts with a smile." He told the court about the early days, when everything still felt like a blessing. He was 14. Diddy was a god in the industry. L.A. Reid had called it a golden opportunity. He's going to teach you how to be a star, they said. And at first, Diddy did all the right things. He took Usher to fashion shows, industry mixers, album sessions. He introduced him to artists, producers, executives. "You're not a kid anymore," Diddy told him one night. "You're one of us now." That phrase, it felt like a promotion, it felt like family, but it was neither. Usher described the small shifts, the way lessons turned into parties, the way rehearsals were replaced by watch and learn nights at exclusive lounges. He remembered one night in particular. Diddy was hosting a gathering in the penthouse. Guests were in masks. Phones were collected at the door. "I thought I was walking into a costume party," Usher said. "But it wasn't that. It was quiet, ritualistic. I saw things no teenager should see, but everyone else just acted like it was normal." He stopped asking questions. Not because he didn't have them, but because no one else did. Then came the Caribbean. Diddy said it was a retreat, just him and a few inner circle members. "I packed a notebook," Usher told the court. "I thought we'd be writing music. Instead, I learned silence." The place was remote, no media, no schedule, just a heavy, lingering sense that rules didn't apply out there. I remember thinking, if something went wrong, who would even know? He didn't go into detail, just said this: "I wasn't there to learn. I was there to obey." After that trip, things changed. Diddy became colder, more possessive. Opportunities came with strings. Studio time became leverage. Whenever I said no to something, I'd get reminded, "Remember who made you." It was always framed as loyalty, but it wasn't loyalty. It was leverage. At 16, they gave him a contract. Standard NDA, the lawyers called it. His mother signed. Usher did too. They said it was to protect the brand, he said. But what it really protected, was him. The courtroom watched as he held up a copy. That paper kept me quiet. It told me I'd ruin everything if I spoke, and I believed it. But the silence wasn't just legal. It was cultural, expected, even rewarded. He recalled a night in Atlanta, age 17, a mansion party. Diddy pulled him aside. "You're not ready for that yet," he said, pointing to a locked door in the back. Usher peeked anyway. He didn't say much about what he saw, just this. There were masks again. Candles, lists, and people who didn't belong in the music industry at all. I remember thinking, I don't know what this is, but I know it's not right. He started writing in a journal not long after. Lyrics, observations, warnings to himself. One entry read, "Loyalty keeps you on tour. Honesty puts you back home." Another, "Too many secrets, too many masks." He calls it culture. I don't agree. Usher looked down for a long moment before finishing. I didn't have words for it back then, but now I do. And I know it was never mentorship. It was control dressed as opportunity. And it worked, because we wanted to believe. Usher closed his journal, but the silence didn't end there. It followed him through every red carpet, every endorsement deal, every staged interview where the real answer sat just behind his eyes. "I thought signing that NDA would protect my career," he told the court. "But it didn't protect me. It protected him." And he wasn't the only one. Because what Usher began to understand, what so many never did until it was too late, was that Diddy didn't need to raise his voice to control you. He didn't need a gun. He didn't need to shout. Diddy didn't need a gun. He didn't need to shout. The empire he built didn't roar. It tightened, slowly, invisibly, until voices disappeared altogether. Anyone who stepped into his orbit could feel it. That intangible pull, impossible to name, but harder to escape. And that system wasn't built overnight. It was engineered. The power of NDAs, when truth gets traded for silence. If you want to maintain the perfect public image for decades, you don't just hide the mess, you bury it in paperwork. For Diddy, the NDA wasn't just a non-disclosure agreement, it was a silencing machine. Everyone in his inner circle signed one. Singers, assistants, chauffeurs, even bodyguards. Each person was handed a pen and a contract, not always knowing what they were giving away. But Carrie Morgan knew. She was Cassie Ventura's longtime friend until the night Diddy struck her with a coat hanger for laughing at the wrong time. The next day, she was summoned to an office. She was handed two things, a non-disclosure agreement and a $30,000 check. She signed, and she walked out with more than just bruises. She walked out with a gag order stamped across her conscience. I knew what I saw was wrong, Carrie told the court, but I also knew what I had signed. And she wasn't alone. Dozens of NDAs were reportedly signed behind closed doors, rooms with bright lights, but no recorders. The fear wasn't just about speaking up. It was knowing that legally you weren't allowed to. NDAs didn't just silence the victims. They warned everyone else this is not a place where the truth survives. But if NDAs locked mouths shut, the next piece of the system locked minds. Flavor Camp, a training ground or a breeding ground for control? Diddy called it Flavor Camp, a training ground for young artists. It sounded aspirational, even elite. But beneath the glamour, former insiders described it as something much darker. Usher was just 13 when he was invited to live with Diddy. He thought he was entering a mentorship, a masterclass on fame. Instead, he walked into what he later called a wild environment, a home where the lines between adult and child, celebrity and stranger, reality and ritual were blurred beyond recognition. Every night was a party. People he didn't know came and went. Alcohol flowed. Lights dimmed, and no one seemed to be supervising. I thought I was there to learn how to succeed, Usher recalled. But I was really learning how to stay silent. Flavor Camp didn't teach vocals or performance. It taught obedience. It taught how to smile while breaking inside. It taught that asking questions meant being excluded, that fitting in meant surrendering. One former staffer said, "You start thinking everything's normal because everyone else is smiling. That's how the brainwashing works." But Flavor Camp couldn't exist on illusion alone. It needed legitimacy. It needed faces, famous, trustworthy, familiar. And that's where the next layer came in. Star shields, when fame becomes a disguise for abuse. Diddy's events weren't just attended by stars. They were built around them. Usher, Ne-Yo, Mary J. Blige. Their presence created a sense of safety, a facade of credibility. If you saw them at the same party, if they were smiling and posing and laughing, how could anything be wrong? That illusion was powerful. For new recruits, it became a mental safety net. If they're okay with this, it must be okay. But what many didn't realize is that these stars were often not okay. Some were bound by their own NDAs. Others were tangled in contracts or dependent on Diddy for career survival. Some may have been victims too, but when you're drowning in a golden pool, it's hard to admit you can't breathe. That's how the system stayed intact. Familiar faces up front, darker realities behind the curtain, and ensuring that curtain never got pulled back. That required a whole machine. The PR machine, lawyers, pastors, and press on payroll. When scandals hit, Diddy never spoke first. His PR team did. Legal teams did. Strategists stepped in like clockwork. Damage control wasn't a reaction. It was a rehearsed routine. When the 2016 hotel surveillance video of Diddy assaulting Cassie leaked, a formal apology came within 48 hours. But it didn't come from the man himself. It came in a sanitized, calculated press release crafted to save face, not to show remorse. "He didn't write it," said one crisis manager. "It wasn't for Cassie. It was for investors." Behind the scenes, friendly media outlets helped steer the narrative. Some downplayed the incident. Others distracted readers with unrelated stories. It was all part of a playbook. Contain, redirect, erase. Religion played a part, too. Diddy donated generously to prominent churches. He gave million-dollar checks on camera. He spoke on stages about redemption and forgiveness. And it worked. When someone stands next to a pulpit, one media analyst noted, it's harder to accuse them of being a predator. This was the factory. Clean the dirty water, repackage it as holy. Not to stop what was happening, but to make people look away. The things everyone saw, but no one spoke about Dawn. Richard, a former member of Danity Kane, told the court she once watched Diddy smash equipment and scream at Cassie backstage. It was brutal, but she said nothing. Why? Because she knew the cost. In entertainment, speaking up doesn't make you a hero. It makes you radioactive. Once you say something, you're labeled difficult, she explained. And difficult people don't get booked. For years, artists, staff, producers, even attendees witnessed things they couldn't forget. But none of them spoke, not out of ignorance, but out of knowledge. They knew too much. They understood too well. And that's exactly why they stayed silent. So if you're wondering, why did it take 20 years for this to come out? The answer is simple. It wasn't a secret. It was a truth buried under contracts, luxury, loyalty, and fear. A truth locked inside a system designed not to succeed, but to never be exposed. Until now. The video didn't just go viral. It spread like wildfire no one could contain. A single clip, captured by a hotel surveillance camera, ripped through the internet with the force of a tidal wave. It showed Diddy kicking and dragging Cassie Ventura in a hallway. No music, no denials, no room for doubt. This wasn't an accusation anymore. It wasn't whispers behind closed doors. The world had seen it. And for the first time in his career, Sean Diddy Combs couldn't spin it, silence it, or smile his way out. The reaction came fast. But what no one predicted was how massive and how permanent the fallout would become. When artists turned their backs, the first punches didn't come from press conferences or public takedowns. They came on stage, quiet, deliberate, and impossible to miss. Kesha, the pop rebel who once shouted out Diddy in her breakout hit TikTok, began performing a new version of the song. His name, erased, not mentioned, not acknowledged. The crowd noticed. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. Joe Jonas followed suit. During live performances of Cake by the Ocean, a track that had once flirted with references to Diddy's influence, lyrics were quietly altered. Again, no tweets, no statements, just action. These weren't grandstanding celebrity gestures. They were small but loaded acts of disassociation, signaling something bigger. The people who once stayed silent were choosing a side. And the message was clear. Diddy no longer represents power. He represents liability. But it wasn't just the stage that turned, it was the internet, the social media recoil. Once the video hit the timeline, it couldn't be stopped. It moved with a velocity that even Diddy's seasoned PR team couldn't anticipate. Shared, reshared, dissected, captioned. And then came the old clips, talk show appearances, behind-the-scenes footage, interviews once dismissed as Diddy being Diddy. Now, under a new light, they looked different, darker, sinister. Suddenly, the internet was full of replays. That awkward laugh he forced from Cassie on a red carpet. That moment he snapped at a young artist during a live Q&A. Lines once brushed off as ego now read like coded threats. Comments flooded in. How did we miss this? It was always there. We just didn't want to see it. This wasn't just cancellation. It was collective re-evaluation, a cultural reckoning. First came the shock, then the certainty, then the rage. People didn't wait for a verdict. They moved. They stopped streaming. They unfollowed. They made space for victims to speak. And when the people moved, the corporations finally followed. The business exodus. No brand wants to trend for the wrong reasons. And when the Diddy backlash reached critical mass, companies moved with speed and clarity that spoke louder than words. Macy's, longtime retailer of the Sean John brand, pulled the entire line from its shelves and online store. No explanations. Just gone. Howard University, once proud to present Diddy with an honorary degree and maintain ties as an alumni success story, stripped the honor. They canceled financial agreements. The silence was deafening. Then came Hulu. A family-based reality series featuring Diddy and his children had been in development. Budget locked, episodes in production, but days after the scandal reignited, the project was scrapped. This wasn't about proof anymore. It was about risk. Nobody wanted their name next to his. And beyond the headlines, the ripple effects spread deeper through the very foundation of the entertainment ecosystem. Because Diddy wasn't just a celebrity, he was a financier, a collaborator, a gatekeeper. Now the gates were crumbling. Industry reforms and cultural shifts. Radio stations began quietly removing his songs from rotation. No press releases, just fewer plays, fewer streams, fewer mentions. Outside the courthouse, a different kind of storm brewed. On TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, content creators, influencers, podcasters flooded timelines with reactions. Clips of the trial went viral. Think pieces surfaced overnight. The hashtag #Justice for Cassie wasn't just trending, it was rallying. And the impact rippled. Artists began distancing themselves more aggressively. Some canceled scheduled performances tied to Bad Boy Records. Others removed old collaborations from their digital platforms. Statements of solidarity with victims of abuse flooded Instagram stories. Domestic violence advocacy groups released statements naming Diddy directly. One labeled him a case study in weaponized power and institutional silence. By now, the court had stopped debating if the system failed. The only question left was how long it helped him win. The empire wasn't collapsing in a single explosion. It was coming down brick by brick, with every broadcast, every repost, every pair of widened eyes watching the trial unfold. What once made Diddy a legend, his control, his charisma, his chokehold on narrative, was now the evidence being stacked against him. And when everything you built becomes your undoing, there's no PR team in the world that can save you. There was a pause, longer than usual. A quiet, not born of hesitation, but of gravity. Cassie stood up. No trembling hands, no tears, no dramatics. Just a woman who had carried silence like a second skin for too long, finally peeling it away. The room, already hushed, seemed to lean in. Even the judge didn't reach for a gavel. Even the stenographer paused for just a breath. Cassie's voice was clear. Not loud, not theatrical. Just steady, like someone who had waited years to say something and had finally run out of reasons not to. "I'm not afraid anymore, Strout," she said, looking straight ahead. "I didn't speak for me. I spoke for the ones who never got the chance." It wasn't a statement of revenge. It wasn't about punishment or pity. It was a release, a warning, a truth long buried beneath contracts, glamour, and fear, finally rising to the surface without apology. She didn't ask for justice. She didn't demand consequences. She simply told the truth, knowing full well that sometimes truth is the only reckoning that matters. And when she sat down, the air shifted. Not with applause or outrage, just a silent collective understanding. Something irreversible had happened. The weight of her words. For a moment, even the judge looked away, perhaps to blink back tears or to hide the impact. A juror wiped her cheek. Another folded his arms and stared into the table. There were no whispers, no dramatic gasps, just silence. Heavy and sacred. Outside the courtroom, the world was no longer debating guilt. The trial, for all its procedures, had transformed into something else, a reckoning. Cassie's closing words were quoted across every major news outlet within the hour. They weren't just closing arguments. They became headlines. They became rallying cries. Social media platforms filled with tributes to her strength. Posts read, "This isn't just Cassie's story anymore. It's all of ours." Organizations for women's rights, artist coalitions, and survivor networks issued public support. "You're no longer alone." Suddenly, other voices began to rise. Stories once shelved out of fear, now cautiously, courageously resurfacing. The trial didn't just close a chapter for Cassie. It unsealed doors for countless others. But none of it, not even the waves of praise and validation, carried the weight of what came next. The final image. As Cassie stepped out of the courtroom, the late afternoon sun cut through the buildings like a spotlight. Its rays caught the strands of her hair, outlining her in gold. No paparazzi flash could compete with the simple brilliance of that light. She didn't cover her face. She didn't look for the cameras. She didn't smile. And she didn't need to. Her head was high. Her walk measured, like someone stepping out from the shadows of something that once caged her, but never really broke her. Behind her, the heavy courtroom door closed with a loud, echoing click. One sound. That was all it took to signal the end, not just of a trial, but of an era built on silence. No speech followed, no press statement was needed. There was only the wind, and a stillness that didn't feel empty, but earned. A woman had walked out of that courtroom. But what followed her, what lingered in her silence, was a mirror held up to the industry that once ignored her screams, and this time, the world was listening.